think what the difference is actually, if you look at again the sort of median and top quartile returns for big and small, broadly defined, it looks really similar. So to really, and again it's math, isn't it? So if you think there's 650 small funds in Europe, say, the top quartile, that's the 175th fund. So unlikely that the 175th down from the top is going to be the one that's generating really excellent performance. It's sort of a numbers game. So long-winded way of saying that I think for the small ones to do really, really well, it's not really about the quartile. It's more about the decile. So the exam question is, can you pick that? Can you pick the decile? And is it a consistent, repeatable model that scales? And if you can believe all of that, then it's going to do awesome. But that's the trick. So I think and what you see with talking to the guys earlier about it is the flow of capital being such that the money is coming in like a fire hose, and it's coming into the top because it has to. So there's still a totally legitimate role for smaller funds, and they certainly perform. But the challenge for investors is going to be, how do I do the picking? Because probably getting to the quartile is not going to swing the needle enough. And then how does it fit in my portfolio on a sort of relative scale basis to make it all add up? It makes sense.
And Chris, from your experience, I think you came out of the back of the crisis really well. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, so this is less a relative observation about large versus mid-market or small, but I think large has at least been behaving differently this time around than where we were, assuming we are late cycle. I doubt there's much dispute about that, but where we were in, say, 2006, 7, 8, that was all about big capital structures, big deals, big entry multiples, often very cyclical assets, and I think that was what created, certainly for us and for others in the industry, at the larger end of the industry too, that's where the problems surfaced. I think this time around, everybody, or not everybody, but lots of people have a strategy that is much more focused on a form of resilience, minimizing cyclicality, less complicated capital structures, probably not quite as big, and therefore, when we go into whatever the next downturn looks like, and it won't look like the last one, I think the industry will fare differently. Doesn't mean it'll be fantastic, but I think it will fare differently, and I feel as if our portfolio, and when I look across the industry, it's broadly true. Like it's less obvious where the problems are now than it was back then. I think people have learned and absorbed lessons. Now, obviously, the longer this episode goes on, the greater the risk that they start forgetting that stuff. But for now, I would say that we're in a different place.
You talk about resilience, non-cyclical deals, learning lessons of the past. Jim, you mentioned this a little bit earlier. A bit of a knock-on effect there for valuations in the market as well. Then, if you're going after these high-quality, non-cyclical assets that will ride out the stormy times.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what you've seen, certainly amongst, I'd say, the larger funds, lesser extent, the smaller ones, certainly the larger ones, is funds are sort of going for domains. So they're saying we're not generalists, really. We're picking individual areas where we think the sort of secular structural drivers for a subsector are what we want. It's got a level of industry fragmentation that means we can build scale through M&A, and there's attachment points at the top of it where we can sort of get going and go from there. And then they look at that, and then they juxtapose that against playbooks. So how many ways to win? How many different execution strategies have we got, and how many times have we done it? And where the Venn diagram overlaps, that's where they run. And that's, to Chris's point, that's a really good way of managing risk. So it's an industry that you hopefully know very, very well. We spent a lot of time getting inside it, so you start from well up the learning curve. And then the playbook, you've done it before. So the classic, everyone runs to this example of Advent and Bain and payment processing. I mean, they must be ready to do the movie by now, right? They've done it so many times. So that de-risks it significantly. But the trick with that is that you look for these sort of areas where the characteristics prevail, then clearly that's an interesting way to do things, and prices keep rising. And that's the amber-ish, reddish, amberish light, is just the price of doing business. And what you see is people taking some quite punchy views on entry pricing around. And the reason they do it, I need both hands for this, is what's defining success is the point of arrival, right? So you're starting here, and you're saying you're going to get to there. And how aggressive you are on the point of arrival, how much transformational risk that you're willing to underwrite kind of determines how aggressive you're going to be here. So if you're starting at 100 and saying, a business makes 100 million EBITDA, I'm awesome, it's going to make 300 by the time I'm done, then you're desensitized to the starting point because you're so convinced of the ending point. And if you're right, then you're a genius. And if you're wrong, you're in trouble. And at the moment, no one's been proven wrong, but someday they will. But that's I think, what causes this price creep at the beginning. It's the conviction around how good they are at the transformation. And that backs into this, is it a sector we know? Is it a repeatable model that we've done? What's the worst that could happen kind of thing? And it allows people to sort of drift up the way. And then the final piece of the puzzle is the assets that they're buying. Quite a lot of them, Chris's point around resiliency is a good thing, except when it means that you underwrite the resilience. So you see the B2B software plays going, well, actually, we're 80% recurring revenue. So therefore, we're paying 20 times this year's earnings, but actually that's only 16 times 2021. Okay, doesn't sound so scary, but that's 2 years away. So they're sort of factoring in the resiliency into the underwriting, and then they're doing this full potential thing with a load of conviction. We'll see.
Not to put you on the spot, Chris, but you just raised a recent growth fund as well. Do you have a different underwriting process between that fund and the main buyout fund?
Well, we do, because the big difference, clearly, between a buyout fund and a growth fund is that you don't have control in a growth fund. And therefore, to Jim's point, conviction is everything. You've got to build that conviction. That's all about pattern recognition, the confidence of being able to execute. And I think the key point, the addendum I'd make to Jim's remarks is that the margin for error gets smaller and smaller and smaller as the entry multiples go up. On the growth fund, on our growth fund, without control, which is obviously what enables you to make radical change if things don't go according to plan, means you have to have even more confidence and conviction about the quality of the asset, because you can't change management and you can't pull big levers if things don't work. And so that has been, I think that's been the big learning experience for us in this whole exercise, is just how much time you need to spend to get the confidence that the business is of sufficient quality, that the absence of control is a risk that you're comfortable underwriting.
As a spot on, the thing I worry about is boiling the frog. So, and this is, if you drop a frog in boiling water, it'll jump right out. If you just keep warming the water up really slowly, frog will be fine, right up to the point it passes out. And the thing with what we've got is that it's a slow, gradual creep up the way. Just nice and gradually, but always up the way. And I worry, we might be boiling the frog a bit. And the cure to that, and again, Chris's firm is a really good example of that, is if you look at what happened the last time when things kind of went out of control, what really catalyzed it was a governance failure. So the governance structures amongst the GPs that took the decisions broke, and they let the frog get boiled, and then they found out the consequences of it. And I think what's happened this time round, and many firms have done it, is they've tightened up the governance a lot. So they're much less likely to let that happen this time round, because A, they've seen the consequences of having to fix it the last time round, and B, they've taken real steps to do that. So they've tightened up, they've narrowed down the decision-making bodies, they've made it tighter. And that, hopefully, is a mitigant to this frog boiling that we're seeing.